So to follow that, we go to the Texas death match between Swerve Strickland and Hangman
Should we
Page.
take like a 10-minute break before talking
Yeah,
about
we
this
might have
one?
to put up a technical difficulty sign for a minute here. This is I'm going to do my
Oh,
best, folks. 29 minutes and 47 seconds of action between these two. And
what?
oh yeah,
I'm shocked at the time.
too long or too little than you thought?
I didn't feel it at all. Like,
Oh
I
yeah.
mean, I'm not surprised that it felt that long because otherwise, how would you cram that much in? But I never felt the 30 minutes at all. Wow.
So Hangman storms the ring. First of all, Nana comes out and they've got dancers all doing the Prince Nana dance, but Swerve is just like in the exact mode he should be for entering a Texas death match. He's not taking part in any of this
He's a baby
side stuff.
kidnapper.
Yeah, absolutely. He is a baby kidnapper. So Paige doesn't get any entrance, just attacks him, and they go right at it, hits the buckshot lariat immediately, rams him into the barricade. How dare you go into my house and touch my child's crib? He whips a chair at Swerve, duct tapes his wrists, and starts attacking him with a staple gun. And he is stapling him over and over and over again, staples a piece of paper to him. Then he takes the paintings that Swerve tore up of his son that he had posted on the refrigerator, and he tries to staple it to his cheek before ripping it off of his cheek. He brought his child's finger paintings to California.
This was this was incredible. I mean, the whole match was incredible already up until this point, but I think this little added extra bit of I guess pretty emotional sort of like story involved here. You're essentially bringing your son into this incredibly violent war in an incredibly violent act of stapling something so innocent to a man's face. And these were these were legit staples. Like you could see them off of Swerve's chest. I couldn't believe it.
Swerve had to have taken like a dozen of these staples
Oh,
at least. So, and dude, Swerve did an like all-time gusher here. He is
yeah.
just
I'm gonna get demonetized, I think, by showing this, but I have to. Like this is
probably will, if not for this, for the description of the next scene, because Swerve is leaking blood and
oh
Hangman Page leans down underneath Swerve, so you get this waterfall of blood onto Hangman, who opens his mouth and the blood goes into his mouth. This was among the grossest things I have ever seen in a professional wrestling or any setting. And I
but
would argue this was a visual like I would not want on my television.
add it to the list, I suppose, of like, all-time AEW visuals that maybe you would question, but man, dude, I don't know why, but like I can't fault this because it fit, John. Like it fits like this very special feeling that this match managed to create. And that's the feeling of a man whose house was broken into, whose baby was threatened, wanting animalistic revenge. Okay, John? Like all logic is thrown out the window. At this point, you're just going to kill somebody. And these are the actions of a man who's been driven insane, drinking his victim's blood. Like it was a holy shit moment that to me just fit the story and took it to another level. And I mean, me during the pandemic would not be saying this at all. But man, tonight it just worked.
Yeah, and maybe it's making a mountain out of a molehill, but let's remember the market that they're in here in like adjacent to LA. There were probably like key people at this show, and you are selling your television show this next year. And I'm just going to say this will probably be one of the scenes of the pay-per-view that is all plastered online tomorrow. And if you think
But
that a dude snorting cocaine led to a backlash, you just look at something like this and it's
yeah,
I can give you the argument of the story, but you are also on the market to sell your show, and maybe this means nothing. They've done some crazy violent stuff, but there's also, it just depends on, it's all in the person that sees this and what their reaction is as
you're
well.
totally not wrong to bring this up. But like you said, John, there have been maybe not this bad, but there's been bad shit on AEW in the past, and from all accounts, it seems like the networks have given them the go ahead for more of it, right? So it could be a
But
negative
we're not
reaction.
talking just Warner Brothers Discovery as well, like potentially.
Right. But you don't know the reaction. Like if this was Amazon, for instance, and they were shopping, I mean, you see the amount of gore that they have in some of their shows. I mean, that might be an attraction. It's hard to know, like what reactions are going to be. I just maybe know that the audience's reactions, I have to assume, were good
Well, this
for
audience's
this.
reaction, like they were horrified. Like the reaction to
Yeah.
this, it was like a horrified reaction. And it's not like AEW either shied away from this. Like they got this clip up on their social channels. Like
Mhm.
they knew that this was the shareable moment of well, one of many in this match, but it
Yeah.
was I don't know. I feel like I have again, as I always say, like these are not my like dream matches to sit down and watch, but I can certainly appreciate when they're done effectively well. But this spot right here was like stomach turning to
Did you
watch.
feel the same way, like, in MMA when, like, BJ Penn licks his gloves of his victim's blood, for instance, or
I
any
mean
sort of
that
punishment?
was dude. It's not as though those things happen in MMA and these same conversations happened. Like the UFC, like remember when they went to Fox and there was like blood on the canvas, they would replace the canvas when they would go on to Fox because of like advertisers did not want to see their logos splattered with blood. And over
Right.
time, that's matured and they understand what the sport is. But they were still in an audition phase, and yeah, that kind of stuff was looked upon as like things that they didn't want to shine a spotlight on.
And is that still the case?
No, it's changed now, but you also don't have guys licking blood off of people's mouths either. It's in such frequency, but you have other problematic issues in MMA as well. Again, I'm not making like a big controversy over this. I'm just stating that you watch this in or out of context, and like
The
it's
question
not
of
just wrestling fans that are digesting this stuff.
where the line is, especially when it comes to violence in professional wrestling for a major national international promotion is always going to be there, and this was a match specifically made to straddle that line, if not go past it.
So Swerve is just a bloody mess here. And then he
Oh,
starts no selling the staples. And
oh,
dude, Swerve was like unbelievable. Like both guys, this was
amazing.
probably a career match for both of them. And that's
Yeah.
saying a lot. But dude, like Swerve, both of these guys felt like this should be your world title program. Like this is a all-time rivalry that they can go back to at any point over the duration of these guys' careers. But when Swerve started no selling these staples, like he is at another level when it comes to persona and character and does not even have to talk in these like the vibe he gives off is there might not be anyone at this level in this company.
Completely agree. I mean, for a long time, I think we've said this guy, they did a horror movie skit, if you remember, with kidnapping Billy Gunn. And
Oh yeah.
I mean, this is that guy. Like he seems to very much embody horror movie villain, in such a such a perfect way for professional wrestling. Let me just say though, like this early portion was so sadistic on the part of the babyface that it almost turned into a double turn, with the crowd cheering, for Swerve because they almost felt like Hangman was going too far. But again, how else should somebody react when their house and their baby's
It's a
nursery is
baby.
broken
It's a
into,
baby.
right?
He's got carte blanche.
That's it. That's the
Drink that blood up,
justification.
okay?
W
Put it
we
in a
again,
shot glass.
we can joke about maybe how silly that angle felt at the time. They needed something like that, and it's all in the reaction and the way they played it to make it serious, and I think they more than did that tonight.
Swerve pulls out a cinder block, which leads to a Death Valley driver to Hangman on top of the cinder block. Then they somehow manage to balance on top of the guardrail, and Swerve hits a pile driver on the guardrail. I don't know how the hell they pulled this off without slipping.
With all the blood, absolutely, and just like I have to think anybody who loses that amount of blood would have issue with their balance or just breathing, you know? Uh,
I mean, these guys, like what all they had mapped out. I mean, they were not missing here.
yeah.
Page wraps a barbed wire around Swerve and hits a fallaway slam, then pulls out a barbed wire chair and proceeds to hit a Orihara moonsault holding the barbed wire chair. Then we see a tombstone reversal, a barbed wire chair to the back, followed by a power bomb and a Swerve stomp by Swerve onto the barbed wire chair. So then it's time for Swerve to go, and he pulls out a bag of glass that he pours over the back of Hangman and proceeds to hit a 450 splash onto the glass on Hangman's back. And this crowd is just blown away by this. Follows the JML driver, and the count begins, and Hangman gets up at the count of 9. This could have been the finish, and they still had like another 10 minutes to go here. So we see a barbed wire board introduced, and this is where Hangman comes back and manages the fall away moonsault off the top with going through the barbed wire board that had been balanced on 2 chairs, hits a power bomb onto the board, and then a dead eye wraps the barbed wire and hits a buckshot lariat. And you think Swerve is down for the count. Nana pulls him to the floor, and he lands on his feet. And this is when Brian Cage runs out, attacking Hangman, hits him with a power bomb, buckle bomb, crowds chanting for fire, and Page uses the barbed wire around his elbow to take care of Cage and hits him with the lariat. Nana then uses a chair and is caught by Hangman, which leads to Nana falling to his demise with a deadeye off the apron through a table. Swerve breaks the cinder block from behind over Hangman's back and then hangs him with a chain from the post, and Hangman is down unconscious on the floor.
He hung the Hangman.
He hung the Hangman, and the count begins. Hangman still manages to show life at the count of 9, which I thought was a nice little intricacy, but it wasn't enough that he could get up, and the match ends at 29 minutes and 47 seconds. I think like the standard of like any of these types of matches from this point forward is going to be compared to this one. It's going to be, I don't know if it's the most violent match that anyone has ever seen. It's going to be up there. And more importantly, it was on a platform that more people are going to see probably than any other comparison points. But in terms of all-time great AEW matches, I think this is in that conversation. I would put this like Moxley and Hangman had a similar match like this that we were glowing about similar. I think this topped that, and I think this is going to be a match that these two are they will forever be linked, I think, through a match like this.
Completely agree. I think it's definitely if not the most violent AEW match ever, like it's at least in that conversation of like, top 1 or 2. I think, death matches in the deathmatch community probably like regularly see blood of this sort to an irresponsible degree even. But I would even suggest that this was probably very satisfying for that audience, and that's probably saying a lot. I thought this was one of the best matches of the year. And I don't even know where to begin about this one, John, because, oh man, the intensity was incredible from the get-go. I think Hangman has been so good ever since his home was invaded, okay? And again, it's all in the response of the character, despite how ridiculous this story might be. He immersed me into the story of a man getting revenge for his baby's life being threatened. And again, I completely bought into his animalistic desire to exact revenge. And it just tells you like maybe you can get away with almost anything as long as the response to it is serious. And this completely felt real. The staplers was insane, and then Swerve using them to staple himself was nuts. You had one of the all-time most grotesque blade jobs I think I've ever seen on camera. This is a visual that I'm sure we'll last for quite a while. The blood dripping into Hangman's mouth was another highlight that, if you want to call it that, that definitely treaded that line between what's too much. I thought as a viewer, though, it completely immersed me into this fiction and this story. And while simultaneously being like worried about these human beings going too far, and that's that weird tension that I think these type of matches can provide. On the one hand, you're really getting involved in the fiction while at the same time being kind of concerned about whether or not they're safe, and also whether or not they can stick the landing on every intricate thing that they planned. And they planned a lot, John. Like Arihara moonsaults, like that moonsault power slam from Page. It just like these breathtaking stunts while a man has like bled half of his body's worth of fluid. And then they nailed everything. So I just I was tense, like coming off of this for pretty much a good portion of the rest of my evening.
Yeah, listen, I think you'd be crazy not to applaud what was pulled off by these two. I think it was incredible. I think there's also such a level that we are now asking to be one upped. for a future iteration of this that you keep pushing. And again, maybe it's like we recently like reviewed his documentary, so it's more fresh in my mind. But
You're right. Nigel had to call this. You're
it
right.
wasn't lost on me that Nigel was calling this and frequently noting how difficult this was to watch. And for him, I think he's in a very difficult position where
Mhm.
you either are just parking your concerns and your legitimate worries with the understanding of where pro wrestling is, and there's only so much you can do. But
Mhm.
at the same time, like, here he is having to call a dude drinking a guy's blood in the middle of a ring, and this was someone that would not go into a ring if a previous match had featured blood in it.
He's been very outspoken in the past about, making sure this irresponsible blood use is not taking place in professional wrestling. I'd love to know maybe his updated thoughts on something like this, and would he consider this on some level responsible blood use? Again, I've always wanted testing and transparent testing, blood testing for any participant that chooses to engage in high level professional wrestling, especially if you're going to bleed. Um, again, it's really hard for me to think responsibility because like I feel like I just saw like this war that drew out the most sort of like base level, primal feeling out of me. And man, this was a huge success. I can't really
I
think
think the
about
message
this
I
one.
saw, someone message me, and I'm paraphrasing, was something like, "That was an all-time classic, and I'm never gonna watch it again." And that's probably
Yeah.
like some people's response to a match like that. But it was out of this world. Like, it was, to me, it was the match of the show, and it was one of the matches of the year. I don't think
Yes.
you can, like, it's its own category in pro wrestling, but you have to be able to acknowledge when it's done at such a high level. And this was like the highest level of it being done for 30 minutes, and the intensity never wavered, and you come out of it, and it's I think going to we talk so often about Matt, like that ladder match, those guys work their asses off. It's going to be forgotten about tomorrow. I can't say that about this one.
This will not be forgotten. We will discuss this at the end of the year, if not even beyond that. And as far as like who wins, I honestly don't even think it matters at the end of all of this because they both kind of lost enough, right? Look at the damage both of these men took. It almost feels like the actual outcome of the match is just a bit of a formality. So for one thing, I'm happy that they gave it to Swerve and they didn't just 50-50 this thing because he really should be next in line for the championship. Let MJF beat Joe, beat Wardlow, beat all these unserious guys, and have Swerve seriously challenge him for the championship because I just don't know if he can get any hotter than he currently is. Secondly, like Hangman exacted enough revenge in the body of this match, in my opinion. The man stapled his son's painting onto his opponent's face. Okay. So I just left this feeling like everything was satisfied, and both of them are that much bigger as a result of it.
Maybe Swerve comes out and he apologizes to Hangman and says, a lot of people think that when you break into a man's house and go up to their baby's crib and threaten to kidnap them, that's a point you can't come back from. But let's remember, in context, Hangman, it's not like I drop kicked your knee inside of the steps, which is what you truly can't come back from, according to the Road Dog.
Uh,
That's the point of no return. I didn't do that.
yeah.